Hi, everyone. How are you? I hope you're all doing well. Roxy music, good, bad, or just different? Well, I like them, and we'll see what you think after this half hour or so. Squeeze, one of Squeeze's frontmen, Chris Difford, had an interesting story about Brian Ferry, and maybe this will set the tone for who Brian Ferry is a bit. Now, Difford went from a chart topping lyrical genius behind Cool for Cats and all that since the 70s with Glenn Tilbrook. Ended up becoming a gopher and a chauffeur for Roxy Music's Brian Ferry. Now, Difford wrote about this in his book, and he truly felt that the experience was up the junction, as he would say. Now, anyone who knows of Squeeze knows that Difford is a brilliant lyricist, maybe a little too British, and the wordplay a little too clever for the American audience. But throughout their chart success of the 70s and minimally in the 80s, Tilbrook would write the music. Difford would send lyrics over to Glenn. They scored 5 top hits that were in Billboard, really. Cool for Cats, Up the Junction, Labeled with Love. And they were compared to Lennon and McCartney. And I believe in 84, they were actually on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, which killed them. They found themselves wealthy and famous. But by 97, they were on the rocks, the group. Difford and Tilbrook were fighting. Difford, very, very pronounced alcohol problem. He was an alcoholic. Tilbrook did a lot of drugs. And Difford was broke. On the recommendation of his mentor, David Enthoven, a former manager of both Squeeze and Roxy Music, Difford went on to work as a lyricist for Brian Ferry, who was his boyhood hero. He's big in England, great writer, very influential, and only to find that it wasn't exactly what he imagined it would be. In 97, he first met Brian Ferry. He was very nervous, and he didn't know how it would go. Now, he adored Roxy Music's music for 20 years. And he just felt that, and this actually was said about 10 years ago, because 20 years would put you in the 90s. And he was really talking about the 80s. But he would go crazy over Roxy Music records. And with Squeeze on the skids, he was employed to help him write songs. He was a lyric doctor, kind of. That was his full title. So most days, Brian marched around his office finding things for people to do, including Chris. His style was like an old schoolmaster. And Chris liked that about him, structured. His tea was always poured to perfection. He was 51 at the time, Brian Ferry, and Chris said he had never seen anyone look so cool at that age. Soon as his responsibilities broadened, he would often drive Brian to Sotheby's and Christie's. He'd look for paintings. Chris would sit in the car at the curb with the radio on. All he needed was a chauffeur's hat, which he didn't make him wear, nor did he wear it. He mentioned it joking around to Brian, and he went and bought him one. He didn't have to wear it, though. And it would have been funnier if he wasn't so loaded. Chris was alcoholic through and through at that time. So he would walk around in all these upper echelon stores with Brian Ferry, dining with Russian billionaires on Park Lane, a place called the Groucho Club with his former Roxy music bandmate Brian Eno, and REM singer Michael Stipe, whose band had recently signed an $80 million contract while this was happening. So Michael had talked to Chris about how REM had opened for Squeeze years before, and how now Chris was in such a different place. And so was REM at that time, late 90s. So there was a 19-year-old French assistant who Chris would talk to innocently, and Brian was very protective of. And she was hanging out with Chris, and they went out to dinner. When he showed his face again to Brian, Brian was very jealous. So he didn't know how to act at this point. And he did tedious work. He made the tea right around noon. He kept quiet unless he was spoken to. He was asked to watch a French film and note down each woman and what they'd scream throughout the movie. It was like a test. And Difford, at the halfway mark of this movie, said, "Wasn't I in Squeeze at one time?" Now, they had been dropped by their label. And they were pop stars in their own right, only 20 years before, right? In 78, they made it to the top of the pops with their first single. It was a dream come true for them. He was recognized at stores, and he felt like a king. He was on the television. All his high school friends marveled at it. So he remembered during this night watching this movie how he walked along a corridor at the BBC seeing the names of all these famous acts, Thin Lizzy, Jerry Rafferty, and he was with Jules Holland, who was his friend, and he was only known as their piano player at the time. This went on for years. They became famous in their own right, Squeeze. Now, what had happened was Brian got very mad at Chris. At one of the concerts, Mick Green had a heart attack on stage. He was saved by two doctors that were at the show, and Brian didn't even seem to notice. He kept on singing. And Chris said that Brian was mysterious and generous, but he could be very angry. In 1999, he was at the Ivor Novello Awards in London with Elton John's old manager, John Reed. And he was sitting with Marty Pello, the lead singer of Wet, Wet, Wet. Now, in the papers recently, he had seen pictures of Marty being wheeled away from a hotel looking gaunt and wasted during a heroin addiction that was much publicized. And Brian went on to tell him that he knew about the story and he almost died a couple of times. He had a fight with Brian Ferry over something that he really won't talk about. And Brian Ferry wrote him a letter that remains sealed on his crescendo to this day. Christopher won't open it. But his recollection was that Ferry wanted to be this mega media star, Prague star, have a Broadway play, theater play written for him, about him. But who was Roxy Music? Who were they, and what kind of music did they put out? Well, they were formed in 1970 by Brian Ferry and Graham Simpson, bass player. They put out an album in 72. Ferry and Simpson were joined by Andy McKay, a saxophone and oboe player, Phil Manzanera, a guitarist, Paul Thompson, a drummer, and Brian Eno, synth. Now, Simpson departed in 72, and the bassist position in the band wasn't stable, people going in and out. Eno replaced Jobson and started doing a little of everything. So they were reduced to a core trio by 1978 of Ferry, McKay, and Manzanera, and many backing musicians. So with their first album, Roxy Music became very successful in Europe and Australia during the 70s. They were more sophisticated than many bands. Glam rock, influencing English early punk. They provided a model for new wave acts, um, electronic composition. Now, Roxy Music split in 1976, reformed in 78, and split again in 83. Their final studio album was Avalon in 82, which was certified platinum in the United States, and and they became a moderately successful cult band. In 2001, Ferry, McKay, and Manzanera and Thompson reunited for a concert and toured together intermittently since, and they celebrated their 50th anniversary in 2022. Now, outside of the band, Ferry and Eno have had very influential careers. Ferry is frequently enlisted Roxy member music as backing musicians during his solo career. Eno became one of the most significant British record producers of the late 20th century. And in 2019, Roxy Music went into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, McKay met Brian Eno at university, and they were avant-garde electronic music. But what were they really about? What was their music? And what did it mean to us as listeners? Well, when they went through their 70s, fairly successful, reunited during the 78 year to record a new studio album, Manifesto, it was a reshuffled lineup. 3 singles were issued from Manifesto. Angel Eyes went to number 4 in the UK. Dance Away went to number 2 in the UK. And they're significantly different, these songs, than different album versions that they had of other songs. Angel Eyes was entirely re-recorded with a disco rather than a rock arrangement, which was on a previous album. Flesh and Blood in 1980. They had been very, very busy. But who are they? Well, hey, Reed. David Bowie, you think of him and you think of a trendsetter, right? And you hear a lot about Brian Ferry if you're into music, but you don't really know. You might know the songs. Oh, Avalon's a good song, but you don't know what he's about. There aren't many bands that sound like Roxy Music. There's no band you can really mistake them for. I think that's a lot of the lure there. When you hear a Roxy Music song, you know it's Roxy Music. Very strange vocals. I think he certainly influenced David Byrne from the Talking Heads to a degree. They combine glam rock and prog rock and art rock. I'm sure he loved Sgt. Pepper, Brian Ferry of the Beatles. They have a sound that's truly their own. Now, if there's anything bad to say about them, maybe it's that many of their songs don't really distinguish themselves from each other, and they often lack great melodies. But that's just part of the charm. On their on their debut, the keyboards are much more pronounced, and you know Brian and being the keyboardist, obviously. But you look at Roxy Music, and that impressive, distinct sound can put you on a journey to really want to hear more of them. Now, they came out with the album For Your Pleasure. John Morrissey once claimed that it was the only truly great British album. Pretty good words of encouragement from a guy that has some reputation, Morrissey. Now, I don't necessarily agree with him, but there's a lot that I disagree with Morrissey about. Now, For Your Pleasure is the last album to feature Brian Eno. So their sound after this album obviously was different because Eno started with them and then was gone before you could shake your head. He already laid the groundwork for synth and then took off in the band. That album didn't do all that much for me. Um, it's weirder than Roxy Music. But I don't think the songs are all that strong. Stranded proved that they could do okay without Eno. Uh, Amazona was very Eno-esque, even though Eno wasn't there anymore. Psalm was weird. A Killer Riff and Mother of Pearl. Um, I think that those were really solid. And the artwork is very in your face, very campy. Country of Life. It was Stranded, but a little artsier. Same album, but artsier. But not quite as good. But it was fun. The Thrill of It All, Casanova. Those songs are almost as good as anything that was on Stranded. Mother of Pearl, Casanova, maybe about the same. Siren. That is a perfect combination of Roxy Music 101, Roxy Music 102. Eno and no Eno. It's catchy, it's bizarre, and it kind of shows you what they've been doing for 4 years. Opens with Love is a Drug, one of the best songs, and their only top 40 hit. Is that really a cult band? Manifesto. That was the first Roxy Music 2 album. In 75, they broke up and no one knew about it. It was a brief breakup. 4 years between albums is a pretty normal gap nowadays. You wouldn't even think of anything. Back in the 60s, Beatles were putting out 2 albums a year and, singles every 3 months. So by the time the 70s came around, it changed music. But it had an enjoyable cadence to the album. Siren. A lot of people call it their worst album. As long as Flesh and Blood exists, I don't think so. Every track in this album, at the worst, is enjoyable, and at the best, enjoyable. Now, Flesh and Blood, 40 minutes of sophisticated nonsense. Everything that made Roxy Music interesting kind of dried up. And even some of the stuff on Manifesto, which was recognizable by Flesh and Blood, you knew that this was a band that was in trouble. But then Avalon, uh, a massive part of our culture with a band like this. More Than This, an amazing song. Amazing song. The way it faded in and faded out. The melody is subtle, it's beautiful. You never get sick of it. And as Brian Ferry's singing, there's nothing more than this. He's right. Way after that song is ended, you just think, wow, that's a pretty good song. I don't think there was ever a song like More Than This written. And it possesses you and it carries you through the rest of the album just because of that song. You have India, quick, it's not even 2 minutes, that song. The space between makes you feel like I've never heard anything like this. Now, there may have been some shortcomings in the two albums since they'd reunited, but this one is something that sums up one of music's great acts that are very misunderstood. Now, More Than This, I think, sets you up negatively if that's the only song you've really heard and then you want to start getting into them, because it sets your expectations too high and then you're going to crash because it's so effortlessly smooth, this song. It feels like it should define the band's sound. It's their day in a life. And you would think it would have set them up for decades, and it set them up. But amazing. And when they were put into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, many people had never heard of them. That's how under the radar they were. And then Love Is a Drug, I might have heard that. Love is the Drug. So if you're an average fan, you have a totally different feel for what prog rock is, because you think of prog, you think of, I don't know, Yes, maybe the Moody Blues, who started it all, right? Certainly Floyd. But this is something altogether different. This is art that just happens to be written as lyrics, like a paintbrush. You almost feel like you took the paintbrush and wrote words with the paintbrush. And just amazing. So are they good, bad, or just different? I think they're all three. Why can't you be all three? You could be good, you could be bad, and you could be just different. But I think that's what Brian Ferry was going out for. He wanted to be this star. Write plays about him. He believed in his own hype. And he kept it going for a couple of songs, just never kept it going long enough for Roxy Music to be a household name. But it's still a memory. It's like one of those great memories you have in your life that only lasted a second, but you'll always remember it. That's Roxy Music. I hope you guys have a great Sunday. And I will catch you during the week. It's a holiday week. I'll be a little busy, but I will certainly be on here to say hello to you. Thanks for listening to the shorts, the music shorts. I had one person that said, hey, Jen, one person that left me a comment that said, it came up in my short feed and I don't understand. Why are you asking me to like and subscribe when I could play this song anytime. Well, obviously you weren't playing the song at that time, because if you were, you wouldn't have clicked on the mine. Because I do these snippets of songs, so maybe it will remind you of a song you haven't thought about. So thank goodness this guy can now just go past my channel if he wants. But I hope it gave him a little enjoyment, and happy holidays to him. Roxy Music and Concert at Universal Amphitheater. Yeah, Roxy Music, I've never seen them. I would have liked to. I think his voice is pretty shot now. He's got to be 75 at least, right? Uh, Avalon was an amazing album. Amazing album. It was conceptually perfect. It truly was. It had something for everyone. More Than This is dreamy. Dreamy to a fault, but you don't mind it. It's like listening to More Than This is like seeing Elton John come out every 3 songs with a different costume in the 70s. Did you really have to see it? No. But was it fun to see? Yeah. More Than This is that good. It was around 1983, I think. That song caught me. My friend was playing it in the car on the way to Atlantic City, and I thought it was brilliant. And he kind of gives you the feeling that he totally agrees with you if you say he's brilliant, Brian Ferry. But I guess he is, because I'm talking about him, right? Anyway, I hope you all have a great Sunday, and check out. I will have a couple of very interesting live shows this week, I promise. If you're a member of the channel, I saw a couple of people join. Thank you so much. I forget how much it costs to support the channel, $2.99 a month or something. I really do appreciate it. And I'm going to start having, for members only, material that you can watch where it'll only be for the members. So thank you, Jen, for being here, and Reed, who is my buddy, who loves music, I think, as much as I do, and I didn't think that was possible. Everybody, thank you. Have a great night. God bless you all. See you soon.